constellation. In fact, we put some cards out so some of you can actually have this visual. So there's Milton, Massachusetts, down to Milton, North Carolina, down to Milton, Louisiana, up to Milton, Wisconsin, and then way over to the west for Milton, Clearwater, Oregon. We visited some of these towns multiple times, and we'll be going back over the next couple of years to continue talking with them. While we're there, we talk to people about life in their town and their views on the earth, their views on life. The result of our experience is going to be a three-part project. The first part will be a live performance that you're going to see the very beginnings of here today. The second is an interactive website where Miltonians can track the project and also contribute to the project and meet each other, the sort of virtual commons that people are talking about these days. And then the third part is long-term person-to-person community engagement that will include bringing this performance back to those Miltons. So one of the things we're really interested in is how do we bring our aesthetic to small towns who don't really have a context or vocabulary for this kind of work that we do, and then also how to bring the complexity of those small towns to cities like New York. You are meeting us here today at the very beginning of our process of figuring out what this material we're gathering can become. And as we understand how to invite audiences into the world of the Miltons that we've found. So today you're going to see a collage of material that's been put together in this order for today. Performed by Jay Potter, Jeannie Masai, and Amanda Guzman. Thank you for helping us throughout this process. One thing that we're exploring and that we'll be trying out on you guys today is dual focus. So during the show, an actor might hand you something to look at like I was doing beforehand, or they might start talking to you while something else is going on. We're just interested in understanding what that does to audiences, so we'll be talking about that after. If that happens to you, feel free to take your time looking at what's been handed to you, pass it to people who are around you, and if you end up being the one holding it and don't know what to do with it, just put it under your chair, and we'll get it after the show. Please don't leave with anything. What you're looking at here is a gesture towards what will become a larger installation that the audiences will experience before they come to a performance. So we imagine maps and comparative statistics, walls of images, and material that can be a lot more accessible so that audiences can meet Milton in a nuts and bolts kind of way before they enter this more dreamlike expression of the performance. One element you are not getting a taste of today. In each town, we're doing a durational video shoot of the skies over all of the towns. We've done one of them so far. During the performance, if you imagine wherever you look, in front of you, above you, behind you, those skies will be playing in real time. So that will form the scenic environment of what you'll be hearing. So just do your best to hold that in your imagination today. A couple thank yous to all of you for being here. To Kevin Armiento for the rehearsal space, which was very helpful. To Prelude for hosting us, and also to Rena Thander, music director, who you'll see doing some music direction during and throughout the show. Now, as you listen to these bells, and to the sound of that, I'd like you to imagine you are gazing at those skies in front of you, above you, behind you, and thank you so much for being here.
I worked for my dad in a shop in Milton, Spokane, a machine shop. My wife and I newly married in 1979, 1980. The recession hit, and men like me, a lot of machine work just went away. We had a child on the way, and I needed to provide for that. So I had a friend who lived in Walla Walla who said, "Come on down, I'll put you on harvest." And
I mean, there's lots of things we can change. It's starting in with ourselves. I work doing all the deep flow tanks now. But I was in the Mexican Army for about 3 years, and
Actually, I'm the sales manager for a billboard company.
out of the mainstream, and you know, grow their own food. You know, that whole kind of, well, having been a hippie in the 60s, I kind of, like that idea. Plus, well, the main way how I found out about Milton was a midwifery conference. I'm a midwife.
It just seems like things are so divisive now.
Sometimes you're poured a glass of chocolate milk. Sometimes you're served a slice of lemon meringue pie. Sometimes someone gives you a Ziploc bag of kumquat straight from the tree. Sometimes there are 3 grills going with cracklings in the chip bowl. Sometimes you're served a lamb named Elvis for dinner, freshly killed and blessed in the pre-supper blessing, standing in the yard under the trees holding hand. Sometimes you're invited into the kitchen for lunch, leftover chicken soup with rice and a half-turkey sandwich. Sometimes a family buys you dinner at the Milton family restaurant. Sometimes people call you Bae. Sometimes people get dressed up for the first visit but don't bother so much with it for the next one. Sometimes there are 2 little girls wanting to play with their iPads while wanting macaroni and cheese for a snack. Sometimes you're served home-cooked brisket, hush puppies, and coleslaw. Sometimes you walk in and Mrs. Jean Scott exclaims, "But you're so young."
Sometimes you wonder if people would be reluctant to opening their doors to you if you weren't 2 white women with nice smiles, holding a box of cookies.
Sometimes there is no bar. Sometimes they started another town just across the tracks to put the bars in. Sometimes you hear stories about drinking Sam Adams out of 350-year-old silver goblets lent to the church for a centennial celebration. Sometimes you share in chocolates shaped like liquor bottles with real liquor inside. Sometimes you find a weather station that has been there for 100 years. And every day of that 100 years, someone has recorded a reading of the weather by hand. Sometimes you can watch a grown woman blush when asked where the mystery is in her life.
Sometimes you're given a driving tour of things that aren't actually there.
The canning center,
The old post office that used to be in the Stone's house.
The sugar mill.
the grain mill.
The old church with the door that faces down Main Street.
The dog inside the movie.
Mr. Masco's General Store.
The old hotel.
Mountain. What are you doing?
I'm trying to remember what the sky looked like from this exact spot in 1776.
Sometimes there's a giant blade to a windmill lying in the middle of a vast field.
Sometimes there was one town that had all the churches and one town that had all the bars, and eventually those towns combined. But you can still feel the difference between one side of town and the other.
Sometimes you see an example of an original toothpick at the museum that used to be a boarding house. And you hear about how the toothpick was passed around among the gentlemen who took things out of their teeth. And a man was considered rich and impressive if he carried his own carved toothpick.
Sometimes you meet the man who laid down all the sidewalks in town.
Okay. So right here, this is the post office in Milton, North Carolina. If I look to my right, I can see the bridge, which is one end of Milton. And if I look to my left, I can see the crest of the hill. And just over the crest is the other end of Milton. Now just past that wall is the Milton Tire and Grill, run by Patsy and Sam Yarborough. And it is exactly what it sounds like, an auto repair shop and a diner in one building. Okay. Over there, just past the post office, is the Thomas Day House. Now, he was a famous furniture maker in the 1800s. It's an amazing story, a complicated story, but it's on those cards they're holding up, and you should check it out, really. It's great. Now, right across from the Thomas Day House, right there, that old brick building with the awning, that's the general store. Now, Hosanna runs that for Sally Wallace, and they sell antiques, refurbished jewelry, furniture, jewelry, etc. And right up the hill here, we've got the tie-dye shop, the Presbyterian church, and Larry Jeffrey's house. And Larry was mayor of Milton for 6 years. If you turn right, at the top of the hill, you'll pass High Street Baptist, which is right next to Cleota Jeffrey's house. If you turn right at the top of the hill, you'll see the Methodist Church on the right, just before the street ends at Marion Thomas's house. But if you turn left at the top of the hill, you'll pass the High Street Baptist, which is right next to Cleota Jeffrey's house, and Cleota's lived on that corner for 89 years. But here we are, right in front of this tiny post office, and right across the street is, right there, is an old row of old brick buildings. There's Shirley's Gallery, Joetta's Soap Store, an empty shop, Mike's Pool Supply Store, another empty shop, and then Aunt Millie's Pizza, which is known for pizza with lots and lots of cheese. There's a broad porch that connects all those businesses, and if you cross the street, go up the steps, you arrive at the door of Aunt Millie's.
This is the showroom of Blue Mountain Treasures in Milton, Freewater, Oregon. It's a single room filled with gently used salt shakers, baby dolls, work boots, comic books, radios, earrings, and so on. Right here is where you cash out. James is sitting there, early 30s. He runs the place. He moved to Milton to find a quiet place to live. And there's the front door. Now, if you go out that front door, the first thing you will notice is the huge sky overhead. Milton Freewater is nestled between the Walla Walla River and the Blue Mountains over there, and the Seven Hills area over there, now known for its amazing grape growing abilities. But right now, we are on Highway 11, also known as Main Street. Blue Mountain Treasures is in the row of stately two-story brick buildings behind us. They say one of them has an old opera house on the second floor. Now across the street are buildings more like a strip mall, built maybe in the 70s. You'll see another thrift store, an empty shop, a panderia where you can buy tortillas, conchas, etc. Milton Freewater is anywhere between 40 and 60% Mexican, depending on who you ask. Many of them came here first as migrant workers. Now, if you go down that way on Highway 11 and hang a left on Southwest 2nd Street, you will arrive at Central Middle School. Miss Jerry Reese, who still owns a cherry orchard here in Milton Freewater, remembers when that plot of land was just an open field, and migrant workers would set up camp there, cooking their dinners over open fires. Today, Felix Chavez works at Central Middle School as a paraprofessional. He assists teachers, works yard duty, and does a lot of translation for the parents of Mexican kids. Since then, he has raised 2 daughters in Milton. One is in Arizona now studying to be a school teacher, and the other just graduated from Mac High. The population of Milton Freewater is 7,131.
Okay, now we are in the dining room of Aunt Millie's, with simple tablecloths covered with red tablecloths, and it's decorated with a personal touch. There's a stuffed pig on a motorcycle there. A long row of shelves over there with old pictures of Milton, china plates, vases, figurines, and a white trellis with fake flowers growing up it. All along here is a wooden bar. Right here is the cash register where you can pay your tab. So let's say we're playing our tab. You hand the cashier your card, you look up over the cash register, and there's a hand-painted mural up there. It looks a little bit like a painting of the Last Supper, only it's 8 or 9 people of different ages and races, and they're all hanging out enjoying a meal. For a moment, it seems a little like some kind of a general pizza eating scene copied from an ad somewhere. Until you realize that's Mayor Harriet Brandon right there eating dessert. And there's Shirley from the art gallery stealing light. Jack Thomas, who lives across the street from Harriet, is right there reading the paper. Mike from the pool shop is placing an order, and Gwen, who runs the place, is right there taking it. And then there's Taco, who works down at the prison. Danny, the Chaucer scholar, is right there, and that's JR holding that pizza. He's in his 20s, and he's worked as an undertaker over near Danville since he was 17. It's all he ever wanted to do. So there they are, all hanging out, laughing, enjoying a slice of pizza and a beer at Aunt Millie's. And it's quite possible that if you turn your head right now, any one of them could walk through that door right there. Maybe around noon after checking their P.O. box across the street, or around 5 p.m. when everyone trickles onto the front porch for a beer. The population of Milton is 163.
Sometimes your primary contact in town signs all of his emails with, "What a country."
picture of the old school? A photo of your mother-in-law next to a photo of your father-in-law that you finally let yourself take down after more than 60 years. Okay. All right, so when we sit down with people, we like to ask them a few questions that range from really nuts and bolts to really philosophical. Do you want to hear them?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, the questions are, how did you come to Milton? If there was one thing you could change about the world, what would it be? What is your advice for future generations? And why do you think we're here on this earth?
Dang.
Whoa! Whoa! Okay,
Okay.
That's
Right.
wow.
Oh, all right.
Okay, now.
All right.
No problem. Wait, you want me to answer?
So, what do you girls need help with?
I think the best way I ever read about the universe is that it exists in order to exist. And that's as close as you're going to get.
He was the grave digger. I can see him with his pick and shovel on his shoulder, just an old man, even then. And I thought he was the lamplighter, but that's
Well, you know, being in advertising sales, we know that fear is quite a motivator. And it seems like a lot of politicians use fear as, I hate to say it that way, but a way to control us.
When they pulled the gas pumps out, it was the death knell.
They didn't want to put in the new EPA approved pumps.
And there was this guy over there who had like a deli.
Yeah, and people would come on Sunday afternoon and remember the chicken salad.
Yeah, he had the best chicken salad.
Visibility is low today.
Chicken salad.
I can barely see my hand. We call this low visibility.
I can't speak for everyone, but I've settled this in my own heart. That I was created to
And see as far as mountains are. That means visibility is better. Never gonna happen. This is a very typical fall. See them drifting over the sun. There they go right there. See them blow.
There's nobody left. There's nobody left who speaks French anymore. Because as a black person, looking around Boston, there weren't a lot of communities that had that.
Any time now, it's going to appear.
So in other communities. But
not visible.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's there, over there somewhere. See that faint
And that's what we have for you today.
Thank you, and thank you again to PearlDamour. We can sit wherever. Let's get in. Oh yeah. So we have about 10 minutes, and I know that Katie is really interested in hearing some feedback from the audience, since this is one of the first times
Yeah.
you've tried this with an audience. But I wanted to start with one question to maybe give us a little bit more insight to where this piece is coming from in your analysis, the journey of your collaboration. And something that the word that always comes to my mind when I think about your work and also the way that you work together is a question of geography. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how your practice and your collaboration with Lisa is influenced by and sort of dictated in a way by geography, the two of you living in splitting your time between multiple cities, and then this piece being really about the connectivity of geography.
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing Caleb's referring to is that Lisa and I met and started working together about 16 years ago in Austin, Texas. And from that first meeting, we have actually never really lived in the same city with each other. And so the way that we tend to work is we come up with ideas over email, and then we find chunks of time to be in the same city and dive in and work together. But part of how that's influenced us is we started to realize how, even though we have small communities in each of the places we work, all of those communities are fairly similar in that they're people like us. They tend to be artists, they tend to be of our basic economic and educational class. And we started to wonder as we got older as artists and were making work in the world, how do we meet people who are different than us? Not just as artists, just as people. And so we thought, let's make a project where we have to go out and meet people who are different than us. So we sort of thought, well, let's just choose 5 cities with the same name, and that will be a frame. And we Googled top 20 named cities, and Milton was on that list, and that name really woke up our imagination because it felt like a person, as well as there's John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost, that kind of deals with big questions. And yeah, so we just sort of launched that way.
And do you, there's something about your work too that I feel like, I've always thought of both of you as New York artists, even though, you both have lived in New York at various points in time. And I think that part of that too is that a lot of your work, no matter where it is, feels very local. And I wonder, can you speak about how that goes, deals with your process and how that influences, and like who is the audience that you're thinking about when you're making?
Yeah. I think it depends on the piece a little bit, but one thing that's really interesting to both of us is this moment of coming together. And I know that we all talk about that, like, oh, theater is live, people in a room together, but one thing that really interests us is how that relationship is malleable. And so So in a way, each performance is local to the moment and the place it is happening in, and a lot of our first creative considerations are about how an audience can access and enter into the piece. What are the doorways? Which is one of our big questions for this piece right now. And how this piece, will the doorways be the same for people living in Milton as they will be for people living in New York or other cities? I think in some ways the answer has to be no. Those doorways will be different. But in some ways I think they have to be yes, too, because the structure of the piece is going to have to be built to open up somehow. Yeah.
And so do you want to, is that a question you want to pose to the audience?
Yeah. How shall we frame that? I guess where /if did you feel invited in? Where did doors open for you to meet the piece or to come into what it seemed like we were doing? Or did it not yet? What were moments that made you feel like, oh, I'm acknowledged here and this is for me? And it's totally okay if that did not happen. That's important information for us as well. Yeah.
The first time when I did was when she was walking around the table pointing things out in the room, and there was a conversation happening here and one over there. I don't know what it was. There was a lot of space in it. And I think that the music helped as well. But it was like, there was a perfect balance between the volume of their voices and she sort of in her own world, that I could sort of lay my own world on top of the piece. That was like that, and that was where I entered, and then after that it was I was able to much easier to be inside.
For me, I felt connected to when they started sharing the different stories, like going around the room and like saying about, like when she started pouring the chocolate milk and like seeing that and then hearing that speech come through it, I thought that coming from a small town, it was very like relatable, and a lot of people when you hear that, they like the small town, they probably think like, oh, I know when someone did this and someone did that. It was kind of like funny and enjoyable to hear. For me, that was a really strong, like connecting factor. I'm not sure that's what you guys want to show, like that complexity and like how all those different kind of things happen. But that's what I got.
Just before we get to that question, could you raise your hand if you come from a small town, if that's where you grew up? Smallish. What, I guess, let's see, the biggest Milton we are dealing with is maybe a little under 30,000, that's Milton, Massachusetts. And that's how it's radically different than the 7,000, 5,000, 250, and 160. So I guess maybe like 7,000-ish and under is starting to be my definition of a small town. Yeah.
Well, obviously, when she started speaking Spanish, I felt connected.
Yeah.
To being Spanish, but it was weird because when he's talking, I guess he's so close, I thought he was being rude, but I realized I thought it was somebody else. I said, well, then I said, oh, wait, that's the guy. You might want to look into that a little bit, I guess a little spacing, I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because your experience in how they were placed was sort of perfect.
That's
and
my
for
point.
you,
Yeah.
He was a little further away, so he
Yeah.
was able to really, relate. But to me, it was like, I thought it was actually somebody else talking.
Yeah. We do have a goal to bring more Spanish into the piece because, especially in Milton Freewater, over at least 40% and up to 60% of the population is Spanish. And it's one of the blind spots that was introduced to us as we've done our research. Like, oh, we're going to make this website. Oh, half the people in this town don't have computers. And so it's been very useful, the research, to point out our own blind spots that we get because of the policies.
We have time for one more.
Oh, I'm just trying to see where it is when you laid out the sort of the geography of the town and so and so was there and this store there. I really wanted to know exactly who lives where and does what.
So even more detail, you would
Yeah,
have
I
loved.
love the detail, the whole town.
For those of you who are still open to talking, we put postcards on chairs and our websites there, and you can get to us that way, or I'll be hanging around
We have
here.
a lot of lobby space out there.
Lobby
We can
space.
totally hang out.
So we're just gonna strike this and then,
Yeah, and thank you.